Good evening, guys. This is the 3 Count. I'm Ash, and you are watching the 4th episode of the Aerial Offensive. Now, if you are a WWE follower, you will have heard that this week Rich Swann was arrested in Gainesville, Georgia, for, I'm pretty sure it was domestic violence against his wife, which is obviously a really bad thing to do no matter who you are. Bristol's had a knock-on effect within his storyline within the WWE and 205 Live. Now, Rich Swann won a number one contendership fatal 4-way match about 3 weeks ago now to try and get a chance against Enzo Amore for the Cruiserweight Championship. Now, WWE, after hearing that he'd been arrested over the weekend, have indefinitely suspended Swann, which has revoked his opportunity for the number one contendership for the Cruiserweight title. Now, this following Monday, we found out who else is going to be going up against Drew Gulak to go for the number one contendership match next week on Monday Night Raw. Now, the match was contested between Cedric Alexander, Arya Daivari, Tony Nese, and who else there? Mustafa Ali. And the match was eventually won by Cedric Alexander. So next week on Monday Night Raw, for the number one contendership to Enzo Amore's Cruiserweight title, is going to be Cedric Alexander versus Drew Gulak. Now, that sets us up nicely for what happens on this episode of 205 Live. Now, we first of all started off with Arya Daivari being accompanied by Drew Gulak to take on Cedric Alexander in our opening event. Gulak started by saying that Daivari had his second opportunity for the number one contendership stolen by Cedric Alexander on the Monday night episode of Raw, saying that Daivari's one that should have won that match, therefore making it Daivari versus Gulak, an all Zo-Train affair to go against the leader of the Zo-Train, Enzo Amore, next. Well, not next week, but in 2 weeks' time. Obviously, that didn't happen. Cedric Alexander won, and that's where we're getting our match. We also found out from Drew Gulak that another member of the Zo-Train, Noam Dar, has had to go for surgery on his knee following a knee injury this week. He was going to put, I think it was a 94-page PowerPoint presentation before Cedric Alexander came in and interrupted. Now, this is your basic back and forth, heel versus face with your heel manager on the outside sort of affair, with Gulak jumping up onto the ropes and distracting Cedric Alexander on several occasions. The whole manager getting involved physically when the referee's distracted with the huge clothesline to the outside after Alexander left the ring, which sparked the whole little fight out there. The match really was entirely in Arya Daivari's favour, who did take the pinfall loss to Cedric Alexander on Monday Night Raw. He came down to the ring with his chest strapped due to the lumbar check. Now, the match, like I just said, was amazingly, just completely full of Arya Daivari, but it was still eventually won by Cedric Alexander. Cedric Alexander won the match, but during the match, you had Drew Gulak on the outside who had a megaphone, and I think it's quite funny when you got a megaphone at the ringside. You couldn't really pick out what he was saying, but he was there. He had his megaphone. He sounded excited. He was doing really good. He was doing the whole no chance thing when the crowd started chanting PowerPoint at him, showing that they've got support now for Drew Gulak. But Drew Gulak was having none of it. Even though the chants were for him, he was giving him the whole no chance and was just, he was sticking to his heel persona and sticking to it well. I'm really getting behind Drew Gulak over these last few weeks. His character development has come on tenfold from when he was first started on 205 Live with this whole I'm dreaming of a better 205 Live situation. He's gotten better now that he's brought out his PowerPoint presentation. As he comes out with the no chance sign, he comes out dressed in his suit. His entrance music is a lot better, and I think that he could become a main player in the 205 Championship picture. That was that match. After that, we then saw a clip of Monday night where you had Enzo and Drew backstage, and this is where I'm getting all sort of cringe coming from this now, but Nia Jax and Enzo Amore, I'm really not getting these two. It reminds me a whole lot of the Eddie Murphy film Norbit. I'm pretty sure it's Eddie Murphy, but Norbit. where Nia now has gone from this really big, hulking sort of monster to just basically becoming like a flirty plaything now for Enzo Amore, and it's really not easy to watch. But that was there, and then we came from Monday Night Raw into a backstage segment then, which had Drew Gulak, Tony Nese, and Ariya Daivari talking about what's happening with Enzo Amore. Do you think that maybe Drew Gulak could beat Cedric Alexander and then go ahead to beat Enzo for the championship? Now, Enzo eventually interrupted this, saying that he didn't call for a team meeting backstage, so why was the rest of the Zo Train having a group chat without him? He took offence to this and started taking the mick out of Drew Gulak, saying that he'd never be able to have a chance, he'd never be able to take that championship from him. He then turned around and he said that Daivari needs to start stepping up to the plate because he's doing absolutely nothing for the Zo Train. And then Tony Nese got involved, saying, look, you don't need to say that to these guys. These guys are trying their best. What more do you want them to do? So Enzo insulted Tony Nese as well. Tony Nese obviously looked a bit taken aback. Drew Gulak tried getting involved, and Enzo said, look, I'm a good leader. I'll have a moment of zen here, and I'll show you all what a good leader does, and I will lead by example, and I'll show you that in my match tonight with Tony Nese. Tony Nese, member of the Zo Train, standing right next to him, looked completely taken aback and didn't know what to make of the situation, and neither did the other members of the Zo Train. But that left them. Enzo then left the backstage area. We then went into a match then, which I can basically just glaze over. Even though I gave this a glowing recommendation 2 weeks ago, this week it was really lackluster. But for the second time, we had Jack Gallagher along with the Brian Kendrick taking on Kalisto. Now, I couldn't get behind this match because I've already seen it 2 weeks ago. If it was Kalisto versus the Brian Kendrick, on the other hand, that would have been completely different. That would have been fine. But I couldn't take another Gallagher-Kalisto match when I have just seen it 2 weeks ago. I don't want to see it again unless you're throwing some new elements into the mix, which they were not. This match was pretty much back and forth again. Nothing really special stood out. We had a victory from Kalisto this time, but then Brian Kendrick jumped into the ring at the end, attacked Kalisto as you would have expected from this sort of person, from this sort of match. Gallagher and Kendrick then decided to attack Kalisto together, and then Kalisto was then saved by Gran Metalik. Gran Metalik defended Kalisto last week when Kalisto wasn't there. The numbers game obviously caught up with Metalik last week. So Metalik came down, made the save, took the jump to Brian Kendrick. Then Kalisto managed to hit the Salina del Sol onto Jack Gallagher, and the two cruiserweights, the two luchas, were able to stand tall in the middle of the ring. Then we went backstage where you had Drew Gulak catching Enzo Amore as he was making his way to the ring, asking, why do you need to have a match with Tony Nese? What is the point of this? What do you hope to prove with it? So Amore then said it was just purely scientific. This is just going to be a technical match. And then he compared himself quite ballsily to Dean Malenko. Now, Dean Malenko is far superior to Enzo Amore. Now, if you watched WWE back in like the early 2000s and you watched WCW as well, you'll know that Dean Malenko, one member of the Radicals, one of the greatest ever performers that WWE has ever had. And he said that he was going to have a match that would be the caliber and better than Dean Malenko, which of course is absolutely absurd. But he just said that he was just going to teach Tony Nese a few moves, show him around the ring how to do certain grapples. That is what he said he was hoping to prove by teaching the rest of them. And then he said that the rest of the Zo Train was also going to be at ringside. Then we cut away from the backstage segment and went into a vignette showing that finally we are going to get Hideo Itami next week on 205 Live. Now, I am really excited to see which area they're going to put Itami in. Now, I've got to admit, I've been not a big fan of Kenta since he came to the WWE because he's been really lackluster in NXT. I haven't really cared for him, but for some reason I've got a little bit more vigour behind me now that I know that he's coming onto the main roster, where maybe he's not going to get riddled with so many injuries, he's not going to have so many things weighing him down. He can just push himself forward and hopefully be better and show that he can be better than he was on NXT, where unfortunately things just did not go his way. Now, we're on to our main event, Tony Nese versus Enzo Amore with the Zo-Train at ringside. Now, Tony came to the ring, and you could see the look on his face. He did not want to be here. This was not what he had planned for tonight. But he didn't even do the stop at the top of the ramp, and he didn't do the whole, I've got 8 reasons why I'm better than you. He didn't do the whole pointing at his abs. He literally just took his jacket off at the top of the ramp and just walked to the ring, got in the ring, and just stood there, just talking to the ref, looking really confused and asking why was he having to go through this. Enzo then came out and had Ariya Daivari and Drew Gulak come out with him, and he did the whole, Enzo shtick, coming out in like his boxer garb that he's got. He got into the ring, took his clothes, his entrance attire, not his clothes off. That would be wrong and not PG. But he took off his entrance garb. He then stood in the middle of the ring and he started insulting Tony Nese. And you can see Tony Nese saying, why do we have to do this? This is embarrassing. Can we just go backstage? We can talk this out. Now, I actually really sympathise for Tony Nese here. You could see that, I don't know why Enzo had to just just point straight at Tony Nese and make him the bad guy, because all 3 of the guys were talking about Enzo backstage. Why do you have to single out Tony Nese? Now, he was taunting Tony for about 2 minutes, saying about how good he was, just saying, go on, grab my leg, I can show you a few holds. He was just saying about how he's the greatest cruiserweight that's ever graced 205 Live, how he's the greatest cruiserweight that's ever graced WWE, and how he's the greatest in the world. Oh no, I'll rephrase that, how he said he was the best in the world, an obvious play and jab at CM Punk. Now, he was really getting involved. He's like getting right in his face, insulting him. And then when Tony then decided to look over at Ariya Daivari for a little bit of advice, Ariya Daivari didn't have anything to say. He then looked at Drew Gulak and asked him for advice. And while he was looking at Drew Gulak, Enzo Amore slapped Tony Nese square in the face. Now, that obviously really riled Tony up. And Enzo was trying to get in his face, saw that Tony was getting riled up, and Tony backed Enzo into the corner. Then Ariya Daivari got into the ring and clotheslined Tony Nese, forcing a disqualification victory for Tony. But that didn't matter. Tony was then jumped by Ariya Daivari and Enzo Amore, making a mockery of Tony Nese, whilst Drew Gulak stood on the outside, pretty much stunned. This went on for about 2 minutes before Enzo then realised, oh wait, Drew Gulak's not in the ring. Why is he not in the ring? So he offered Drew to get in the ring and saying, look, prove your worth, do something. Do something now. And he was getting right in Drew's face. Drew eventually got into the ring. He got into his face again. Drew really looked like he was about to clock Enzo right in the jaw. And then he turned round and booted the taste straight out of Tony Nese's mouth. And that was quite shocking, because I was sitting there thinking, oh, he's going to hit Enzo. He's got to hit Enzo. This is set up perfectly for him to beat Cedric Alexander on Monday and then go ahead then. And hopefully, I would really like to see Drew Gulak do this and then win the Cruiserweight Championship. But he didn't. He booted the taste straight out of Tony Nese's mouth, and Enzo then said, oh, I don't think he's done. Maybe he needs some more. So then he directed the traffic straight back at Tony, and Drew Gulak then just relentlessly on top of Tony Nese, punching him, putting him into the corner, kicking him in the head. Tony obviously not able to do anything. Then Drew and Ariya pull Tony to his feet. Enzo says he's going to be merciful on him and then hits him with this finisher, leaving Tony out cold in the centre of the ring. Now, the entire time that this was happening, I was getting quite involved. I was getting quite excited because I was quite happy to see this whole, inside, this implosion of the Zo-Train, to see what will happen before the Cruiserweight Championship is going to be contested between what I hope, even though as much as I want to see Cedric Alexander win the Cruiserweight Championship, I want to see Drew Gulak as the storyline stands. So that's what I'm really hoping for. So I'm really quite happy with what was happening last night. But the crowd on hand did not. The crowd, for the entirety of this segment, was chanting, "This is boring." Now, I don't know why. I could see it was a bit slow. But this had storyline progression from what we don't normally get from most episodes of 205 Live. So these guys must have been bored. But this was actually a much better match. They could have chanted that during the Kalisto and Gallagher match. But I don't see why they had to do that when there's actual storyline development happening regarding the Cruiserweight Championship. Now, if there's a way to bury your Cruiserweight Championship, or to even show that you don't care, that's the way you do it. You just absolutely at the top of your lungs chant you don't care about that match. You don't care about the segment, the show, the championship. why are you even sticking around? You don't need to stay around after SmackDown Live to watch this. Go home. Just leave. You know, I know it's an extra bit of free wrestling if you think about it, but if you really don't want to be there and you're not that invested in the Cruiserweight division, as I feel I am, then don't watch. It's optional. You don't need to be there. Just leave. Don't chant at these guys who are actually performing and putting their bodies on the line that they are boring. I know that it's, you know, that you've got an opinion and you are right to voice it, but when you're sitting there through something that is actually optional for you to be at, why are you even there at all? This part of the show is pretty much free. You pay for your SmackDown Live tickets, you get an extra show at the end and wanged on top. I'd be happy with that, but clearly these guys weren't. There were sections of the arena that were empty and had cleared off after SmackDown, but the crowd just weren't feeling it, and that really did upset me. But that was 205 Live. We now look forward to Monday Night Raw with Cedric Alexander versus Drew Gulak to see who will get the chance to face Enzo Amore for the Cruiserweight Championship in the future, as well as next Tuesday we will also see the debut, finally, of Hideo Itami. Now, did you guys watch 205 Live? Do you watch 205 Live at all? What do you think of Hideo Itami, and where do you think his progression will go once he hits the main roster? I want to hear what you guys have got to say. Leave a comment below. Send us a message. I'm really willing and hoping to hear from you. I've been Ash. This has been The 3 Count, and I'll see you all very soon.